All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in this week. I'm still Josh, and this is still
Still Danny.
Danny. And we want to talk to you guys about what matters most in regards to sleep and how that's important. We talked a little bit about rest a few weeks ago, and that is something that some people can do while they're awake.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, the understanding, I guess some people sleepwalk, and that can be a little odd, but sleep is one of those things that some people find. Some people find it quicker and sooner and better than other people. But when we sleep, there's some interesting things that happen. And kind of looking at just a few characters in the Bible, we can see different instances where God's showed up, where good things have happened, and other instances where, whoops, you fell asleep at the wrong time, right? Like there's a time and a place for sleeping, right? Sleeping while you're driving, not a good thing. Sleeping.
Well, what if Jesus took the wheel?
There you go. There you go. And I mean, honestly, if you look at a lot of places where Jesus slept,
Mm-hmm.
felt a little inappropriate at the time, right? There's a storm raging. Everybody's like, oh no, we're going to die. Yeah. Jesus is just sleeping. He's just, this is the sway, back and forth. And
just a little cradle rock.
Yeah. Wakes up and rebukes the storm and is like, hey, be still. And everything's just, and that's an example of Jesus showing his power, and his disciples were amazed at that.
Yeah.
That he could be sleeping through such a crazy storm, but then also that he wakes up and is like, peace, be still.
And then still.
Yeah, and it's just quiet. I mean, can you imagine being one of the disciples in that situation where you're like, whoa.
Right. It's a little more than just getting out of bed and shutting the window because
Yeah.
of the garbage truck.
Yes, yeah. Even the wind and the seas obey what he has to say. It's like, whoa, okay, this guy's got authority. But looking at some things that that God did, for example, in the life of Solomon. Some of you guys are familiar with that story, but basically, Solomon was the son of David, and Solomon was king. And in his sleep, God says, "Hey, I'll give you one thing. Your dad was faithful to me. You're being faithful to me. Like, what's something that I can give you?" And in his sleep, Solomon's like, "I want to be wise." And God honors that request while Solomon is sleeping, dreaming, and Solomon becomes one of the wisest men in the world.
Can we talk about that? That's so weird.
Yeah,
it's the timing God chooses, but in a way, it's kind of funny. First of all, what a request!
Yeah,
to be wise, and then the fact that he does it literally from one day to the next. Like, can you imagine? You go to sleep, you wake up.
Yeah.
What is that? What is that like?
Yeah. To ask a question in your sleep and then have it become reality.
Like, it's not like you had it in the dream. When you wake up from the dream and you're like, didn't actually happen.
Yep. Yeah. Those are good dreams. Sometimes you have nightmares and you're like, oh, like my recurring nightmare is that I cut off my dreads. And I've had that.
It's tragic.
So many times. And I wake up and I'm like, oh, those really real dreams where you feel like it's like, oh no. Right. Another one was Elijah. Elijah was a character in the Bible where he's doing all this stuff that God has him to do, and all this crazy, intense stuff that was countercultural, and everybody's like, oh man, and the queen is like out to get him now, and she's like, you're gonna die, and he runs faster than a chariot, and then gets out to the desert, and he's basically suicidal. He's like, God, just take me. This is hopeless. Take me now. I don't want to live anymore. And God responds to him by sending an angel, giving him food, and telling him to sleep, telling him to rest. And he does that a couple different times. And then from that spot of sleep, he gets up and basically runs an incredible marathon of endurance to the next place that God had him go. And it's incredible what a holy sleep like that can equip you to do. And I think sometimes we rob ourselves of really important things that God has for us because we're not sleeping, because we're not letting our physical bodies get to a point where we can handle what God has in front of us. God can do amazing things, and God has done amazing things and supernatural things that we know are beyond our abilities.
Yeah.
But quality is also important to God. And oftentimes we find our quality of life is better if we're sleeping more or if we're sleeping enough.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't want to sleep too much, because then we go into another situation where falling asleep at the wrong time and, classic example being the one with the disciples, where Jesus is going up, he's about to be crucified, he's having a really, really rough day, like crying blood kind of rough day.
And rightly so.
And asks his disciples, his friends, some of his closest friends on earth, will you guys stay up with me? Will you guys pray with me? And they were totally accustomed to Jesus going off alone and praying. So that was totally normal for Jesus. A big crowd gathered, Jesus would go off by himself to pray. He'd pray at seemingly odd times, but that was to be expected. And so Jesus asks his disciples to partner with him, and they fall asleep.
That's a little
a couple
rough.
times, it's like, oh man. And he comes back and he's like,
Really?
you couldn't stay awake just for a little bit and pray with me? Like,
Come on,
and so sometimes sleep can take away things, where if we get to the point where we're too sleepy, we lose our ability to be present and invested in people's lives.
I think it's like, so with sleep, we have to have it, obviously. We were created that way. God intended for us to have it. But at the same time, you have to be, you need to know when you should get it, and maybe when it's okay to miss it for a certain reason. And so using that, or using your discernment with that, and having I think the discipline both ways, because it's a discipline both ways, to make sure you get good sleep. Like, you have to be disciplined enough to get in bed on time.
Yep.
Because your alarm clock is going to go off regardless. And then in the same way, though, it's like, hey, you can survive without maybe having 8 hours of sleep that night, that one night. Like, you're not going to die.
Yep.
And knowing when that's, when is the proper time to do that.
Yeah, and sometimes God will give you grace and the ability to stay awake longer. If you need to stay awake to help somebody in a time of need, or you need to, the value is there enough so to where you're like, nope, like you said, I can forego sleep in this moment because what I'm giving it up for is more important. Whether that be a person or praying or all that kind of stuff. But we do set ourselves up for success if we're already getting enough sleep. So then we don't miss out on opportunities like Jesus and his disciples did, or his disciples did, in that they missed an opportunity to partner with and pray for Jesus in his most desperate time of need.
Can you imagine that? Like, so when we kind of saw it with Peter, like after the cock crowed the 3 times, he was like, that feeling, but also all of them, like, now looking back at the situation, seeing like, oh, that's why, and then we missed this because of this. Like, that has to be one of the worst feelings ever.
Yeah. Just one of those like, oh no, it's not like you woke up and you missed your bus. It's not like you overslept and were late to work. It's like you fell asleep when Jesus asked you to pray for him, pray with him. Like,
when literally the Son of God.
It's just like, can you guys, like, I know everybody else is sleeping because that's what normal people do at night, but unless you work graveyard, I guess. But it's like, please stay awake, and they didn't. So, a couple other cool stories. Daniel, he not so much was sleep, but he interpreted dreams, and is pretty well known for that. To where if you read stories of Daniel, you either get some pretty interesting insight into end times and interpretation of dreams. Those are kind of 2 big things that Daniel is known for, and it's also interesting that that's kind of it's a little bit out of left field, but it's something that when we sleep, we typically dream. That our mind is kind of engaged in a different way than it is when we're awake. If you think about it, all the different things that our brains are doing while we're awake is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I can do this, I can talk, I can breathe, I can
all good things.
Think, all these things that are going on. But when I sleep, all those other extra things stop. They, I'm still breathing, my heart's still beating, my brain is still somewhat engaged, but there's a different level that takes place.
Yeah.
So,
dreams are weird like that. I think, well, and especially looking at it, then it's like the kings that they literally were given, and obviously you tie it in with like God gave him that dream for this reason, because then obviously Daniel interpreted it and this and that and that, or but then it's like, okay, but he also gave it to that king in that form. Why?
Yeah.
And I thought about it, I'm like, why did he do it in a dream?
Yeah. Well, I think because in some ways that also goes to, that is a way, not the only way, but that is a way that God can speak to us. Because sometimes our lives are so busy, our body is so engaged in all these other things, our spiritual ears are so plugged up that we can't hear God like that. And for some of these kings, and even for some of us, we might be so busy and have so many things going on that we can't hear God in our normal day-to-day life.
No, okay.
And so it takes going to sleep and God being like, hey, I still want to talk to this person. So I'm going to talk to them in their sleep.
Gotcha.
I'm going to give them,
Yeah,
I'm going to give them a dream. I'm going to speak to them, or I'm going to give them a dream that they don't understand, and then lead them to somebody that will be able to interpret it and bring them back to the right thing. So another awkward moment, right, as Joseph, right? While we're on the topic of dreams, how Joseph, went to sleep and had some pretty amazing dreams that turns out offended pretty much his entire family.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I had a dream that y'all were bowing to me.
Sometimes it's like, should you have shared that? Like, buddy, keep it to yourself.
Maybe you should have pulled an all-nighter that night.
Maybe.
That was a little crazy. And some of that was, I would say, if I was to rewind back in time, my opinion of that might be, maybe it was Joseph just in his youth, right? Sometimes when we're young, we don't have tact, or we don't have like a full grasp on timing.
Oh.
Right? You'll fart before the dinner prayer, or you'll burp at an inopportune time, or you'll just keep talking and talking and talking and not let somebody else talk.
You'll
right?
Giggle at a funeral because
exactly.
You something funny. Yeah.
Exactly, because you're scrolling Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Inappropriate. But Joseph, I think, had this amazing dream and didn't really, like, it happened, and he knew it was real, and he knew that it was something that was about to happen, but he didn't maybe have the discernment at the time to be like, should I share this? Should I talk about this? But if you look at later on in his life, he not only he pulled a Daniel in a lot of ways. He had such a deep understanding of who God was and what God was doing, and was clearly able to find rest, and I would argue sleep, in some pretty trying times in his life, that he was able to then interpret dreams of people that were in jail, and dreams of the king, and dreams that was God telling these people what was going to happen, and giving them insight, giving them a little heads up. And again, you wouldn't have those things if you weren't asleep. And for some of these characters that were having these dreams, they weren't God conscious at all. And so for them, in their sleep was almost the best way to get their attention. And so for some of us, sleep is a really big way that God can speak to us. The benefits obviously are our physical bodies are relaxed and everything like that. We can recharge, and you can tell if somebody hasn't had enough sleep because they get, I don't know why. You know why you get the bags underneath your eyes or whatever. But typically if somebody's too cranky, you say, you should get some sleep, right? If somebody's just like, you should get some sleep, right? If, a manner of things. Yes. And so I don't think anybody would disagree with a statement of sleep is really, really good for us. We don't want to have too much, but we also don't want to have too little, because it's something that that God clearly values. Jesus did it while he was here on earth. Jesus he wasn't just awake for 33 years. He slept, and he slept at some oddball times, definitely, for sure. I'm sure he slept at night. But then there was other times where he was up at night praying
Mm-hmm.
and was calling his disciples to stay up. And so just this pattern of we want to find the best thing there. What do we glean from that? What do we take away from that? And what I see in the Bible is just that sleep is a way that God can talk to us. It's a way for our bodies to recharge, and it's a really powerful way for us to really hear God more clearly, you know, and be available and be ready to do any sort of thing that God calls us to. If we've had enough sleep, even if it's been, you know, a little bit on the lighter end or whatever, we can get up and we're energized and we're able to run the race that God has for us and to accomplish the things that he has for us. So what's an area where, and I mean, we all kind of know this, but just kind of hearing from you, Danny, of when you have gotten enough sleep and you wake up in the morning, what is your heart condition or your spiritual condition when you wake up and you're like, I had a good rest, I had good quality sleep, you know, I wasn't stirring all through the night or troubled in spirit or anything like that, but like you slept well, you wake up, now what do you do?
I mean, I think the biggest thing I'm kind of taking away from this as I'm sitting here and, you know, looking at it kind of from this perspective is and we've talked about time and how you need to be responsible of it, and I'm kind of making a parallel there in that for me, if I'm not responsible with my time and then I say don't get a good night's sleep, chances are, you know, if I went to bed really late, I'm not going to get up early before work, which means I might miss out on my devotions. I might miss out on that time that I normally take to do that because I'm just rushing. And that also leads to then, I'm just not in a great mood because I hate being rushed. And then on top of that, I didn't read my Bible. I didn't get my head into that space before my day started. And so, I think it definitely, having a good night's sleep and then being able, that means to get up on time, go through my routine of things, which includes, you know, being able to dive into the Word. That absolutely affects not only my outward mood, but my inward mood as well. I'm just not, I think like we've talked about that joyfulness. It's not, it's not as much like, you know, it takes,
it's harder to get to.
It takes like, I don't know. It takes a bit of the day. And even then sometimes, you know, if you just literally did not sleep at all, like we've had those nights, I'm sure, where, you know, you just didn't sleep and your fuse is a lot shorter. So then being like that, you know, being a good example, it's harder. For me, when
patience is harder.
Yeah.
Grace is harder. Forgiveness is harder.
So it's, I think it affects you more than you think, I think, you know, as well. So if you're not sleeping well for a period of time, it becomes your new normal. And I've seen even people like this in my own life where I'm just, you know, you could really use a couple more hours of sleep every night, couldn't you?
So I guess our encouragement to you guys to wrap this up is just that go after sleep, pursue sleep. It's a odd thing to pursue or to even really encourage you guys to pursue, but some of us don't get enough sleep, and some of that is because we decide to stay up too late playing video games or doing stuff that is not really beneficial. It's not like we're up till 2 a.m. praying, right? If you are, wow, you know, more power to you. I'm pretty sure God's going to give you a better quality with a smaller quantity at that point. But if you're just burning the candle at both ends and you're all of a sudden find yourself out of wax, it's like, okay, that's kind of on you. And so we want to encourage you guys to, in spending your time wisely, some of how you should spend your time is in sleep. It's amazing that you look at some of the statistics of, you know, on average, how much time we spend sleeping. You're like, whoa, years and years and years. You know, you tally it up, but it's like, okay, well, most people, it's a good chunk on and 8-ish off, you know, and that starts to add up. But when you have good sleep, it sets you up for success in some pretty crucial areas. You're able to be more present. You're not groggy and foggy and just running after your pillow, looking forward to the next time you can fall asleep. And for me, I've seen that in my own life where if I don't get enough sleep, I eventually hit a wall.
Yeah.
I eventually get to the point where my body's like, nope, you're sleeping now, whether you want to or not. And I don't like getting to that point.
Shutdown.
Yep. My body's just like, Meow.
That's it.
Yep. So don't get to that point. None of us want to get to that point, especially if you're driving a car, right? But some people, that's where some bad accidents can happen. And they fall asleep at the wheel because they've been up too long, or they've been doing a long shift, or they've got a lot on their mind. And so it's one of those things that you're probably not going to necessarily hear a sermon on it or see something like that, because it's something that I think most people just agree it's a good thing. But even outside of Christian circles, it's like, well, sleep is good for you. But I think we got to appreciate that and value that maybe a little bit more than we do, because some of us are staying up way too late, doing things that aren't helpful.
Yeah, another thing for me, for when I was younger, I would watch a TV show or something, and finally I was able to break that habit because it's so just useless.
Yeah.
I'm I could have felt so much better the next day, but I didn't, because it's is that worth
Yeah.
it? No.
And I understand sometimes it's difficult to turn your brain off, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you just need to shoot up a prayer and be like, God, give me rest. God, give me sleep, because my mind is just racing right now. I've got too much on my mind. There have been a few nights even recently where it's like I start finding myself, I'm just scrolling Facebook, just not even really there, but I'm not tired yet. I'm not asleep. And that's not healthy. So we want to encourage you guys to be healthy. We want to encourage you guys to go after that. And it is something that is interesting that we see a lot in the Bible, different ways that God uses sleep to speak to us, to encourage us, to give our bodies the rest that it needs, and energize us for the stuff that he has ahead for us. So love you guys. Make sure that you get enough sleep this week. Chase after that. And I believe that God is going to bless it. So.
I'm really tired right now. I kept yawning throughout the episode. I was like,
well, that's just because I was talking.